In October 2019, Melinda Gates did something no one expected. She didn't hold a meeting. She didn't confront the media. She picked up her phone and quietly called a divorce lawyer. Then she called another one. Not because of a fight that day, and not because of money. It was because something she saw finally confirmed a fear she had been carrying for years. A realization that the man she had built an empire with, Bill Gates, wasn't the person she thought she knew. What pushed her over the edge wasn't just one mistake. It was a pattern. And once that pattern became impossible to ignore, there was no fixing it, only walking away. When the article appeared, it didn't feel explosive at first. It was quiet. Just another headline published by the New York Times, sitting there like any other story. But the moment Melinda Gates began reading, she knew this wasn't normal news. It wasn't about technology, charity, or global health. It was about her husband, Bill Gates, and his repeated, private meetings with Jeffrey Epstein, a name that already carried a dark weight. For the public, it was disturbing. For Melinda, it was something else entirely. This wasn't shock, it was recognition, the kind that hits when a fear you've buried suddenly is proof. The article laid out details that made one thing painfully clear. These meetings weren't accidental, and they weren't transparent. They were choices. And worse, they were hidden. What hurt most wasn't just who he met. It was the secrecy. The quiet decisions made without her. The realization that while she believed she knew the man she married, there were entire conversations, relationships, and motives she'd never been part of. That headline didn't start the problem. It confirmed it. And once that confirmation settled in, there was no going back. Because this wasn't gossip, it was the moment trust finally collapsed. Years before that headline ever existed, Melinda Gates had already felt something was wrong. It started with a dinner she never wanted to attend in the first place. Back in 2013, she accompanied Bill Gates to a meeting at Jeffrey Epstein's townhouse in Manhattan. From the moment she walked inside, her instincts flared. The atmosphere felt off. The kind of place where nothing illegal has to happen for everything to still feel deeply wrong. Later, Melinda would describe Epstein as evil personified. Not as an exaggeration. As a reaction, she admitted she had nightmares after that night, the kind that linger long after you wake up. That's how strongly it affected her. She didn't shrug it off or try to rationalize it. She went straight to Bill and made herself clear. She wanted nothing more to do with that man. Ever. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a boundary. And for a while, she believed it mattered. She believed her discomfort was enough. She believed that her husband understood the seriousness of what she was saying. That belief gave her peace, temporarily, because what she didn't know then was that this dinner wouldn't be the end of Epstein's presence in their lives. It was only the beginning. What Melinda didn't realize at the time was that her warning hadn't changed anything. Behind the scenes, the meetings continued. According to later reports, Bill Gates met with Jeffrey Epstein multiple times over several years, long after that uncomfortable dinner. These weren't chance encounters or brief introductions. They were planned, long conversations, private dinners. Enough repetition to turn concern into a pattern. That's what made it sting in a different way. This wasn't about curiosity or a one-time lapse in judgment. It looked calculated. Some insiders speculated that Bill believed Epstein could open doors in elite circles, introductions, influence, even whispers of a Nobel-level legacy. Whether that theory was true or not almost didn't matter. What mattered was the message it sent. Ambition came first. Boundaries came second. And all of it happened quietly. No updates. No transparency. Just silence. While Melinda Gates focused on family and the foundation, another reality was unfolding without her consent. That's what broke the illusion. Not just the meetings themselves, but the choice to keep them hidden. Because once someone shows you they're willing to ignore your limits, the question isn't what else they're hiding. It's how long they've been doing it. Just as the Epstein story was taking over headlines, something far more personal resurfaced from the shadows. This time, it wasn't a news article. It was a letter. Quiet, direct, and impossible to ignore. The message came from a former Microsoft engineer, a woman who claimed she had an intimate relationship with Bill Gates years earlier. Not recently, around the year 2000. The timing is what made it explosive. Bill and Melinda Gates had been married since 1994. Their son had been born just a year before. If the letter was truthful, this wasn't a rough patch late in a long marriage. It was early, foundational, a moment when trust should have been solid, not fractured. What shocked many people wasn't just the allegation, it was how seriously it was treated. Microsoft's board didn't brush it aside or label it drama. They brought in outside investigators. Lawyers got involved. Questions were asked behind closed doors, and whatever they uncovered was enough to trigger a major shift. In 2020, Bill stepped down from the board, publicly citing a desire to focus elsewhere. Later, a spokesperson confirmed the relationship had happened. Once the letter surfaced, the story didn't slow down, it widened. Reporters started digging, and what they found suggested the situation wasn't isolated. Over the years, Bill Gates had reportedly crossed professional lines more than once. In one case, he emailed a female employee after watching her give a presentation, inviting her to dinner. He even added a line giving her an out, saying she could pretend it never happened if she felt uncomfortable. There were other whispers too. A woman connected to the Gates Foundation, a work trip, a cocktail event that went further than it should have. Individually, each story might have been dismissed. Together, they formed something harder to ignore, a pattern of behavior that relied on position and silence. When Melinda Gates was finally asked about it on television, the moment was brief but telling. When questioned about whether there had been more than one affair, she didn't rush to defend him. She didn't deny it either. She paused, looked straight ahead, and said those were questions Bill needed to answer himself. That pause said everything. Years of covering, protecting, and absorbing the fallout were over. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was distance. And in that space, the image of a united front quietly disappeared. From the outside, everything still looked perfect. The house was enormous. The security was tight. The schedule was full of global meetings and polished appearances. But inside those walls, Melinda Gates was coming apart. The stress wasn't abstract anymore. It was physical. She later revealed that she began experiencing panic attacks, sudden waves where her heart raced, her chest tightened, and it felt like she couldn't breathe. For someone used to negotiating with world leaders, losing control of her own body was terrifying. The days were heavy, but the nights were worse. She spoke about lying on the floor for hours, crying until she was exhausted, unable to stand. Money, power, and privilege didn't shield her from that kind of collapse. If anything, the isolation made it sharper. There was no place to escape when the problem lived in the same house. Then came the dreams. Over and over, she saw her home falling apart, the roof caving in, the walls cracking and collapsing. It wasn't subtle. Her subconscious was replaying what her waking mind was struggling to accept, that the life she had built was no longer stable. She tried to hold it together for the kids. She tried to keep the public image intact. But eventually, the choice became unavoidable. Stay and slowly disappear, or walk away and survive. And once that realization set in, everything changed. By early 2020, the decision had already been made. There was no dramatic blow-up. No public announcement. Just a private conversation behind closed doors. Melinda Gates told Bill Gates that she couldn't do it anymore. The trust was gone, and without that, there was nothing left to hold together. According to those close to the situation, Bill didn't argue. He didn't lash out. He listened. And in that silence, the marriage effectively ended. What made it even stranger was the timing. The world was about to shut down. As the pandemic took over headlines, their personal crisis slipped completely out of sight. Publicly, they were still a team, appearing on calls, discussing global issues, presenting a united front. Privately, they were separating their lives piece by piece. For more than a year, they lived in a kind of emotional limbo, still sharing spaces, still tied together by the foundation, their children, and decades of history. But the relationship itself was over. Melinda later described this period as a form of grief. Not just for the marriage, but for the future she thought she was building. She wasn't just ending a relationship. She was letting go of an identity she had carried for nearly 3 decades. And once that process began, there was no reversing it, only moving forward, no matter how heavy the cost. When the separation finally went public, the emotional shock was quickly followed by something even larger, the numbers. This wasn't a divorce over furniture or bank accounts. Bill Gates and Melinda Gates were facing the division of a fortune estimated at well over $100 billion. A sum so large it barely feels real. Entire teams of lawyers and accountants were needed just to map out what existed, let alone decide who would walk away with what. On the very day the divorce was announced, billions started moving. Shares in major companies were transferred to Melinda within hours, instantly placing her among the richest women on the planet. This wasn't a drawn-out fight. It was swift, deliberate, and precise, almost as if the groundwork had been laid long before the public ever found out. But money wasn't the most complicated part. There were properties across multiple states. Ranches, beachfront homes, and one of the most expensive private residences in the world. And then there was the foundation, the crown jewel. They tried to continue working together, giving it a trial period. On paper, it made sense. In reality, it didn't last. By 2024, Melinda walked away for good, taking billions with her to control independently. It wasn't revenge. It was freedom. The price tag made history, but what she gained mattered far more than the number attached to it. When Melinda Gates finally stepped into the public eye again, she didn't look like someone recovering from a loss. She looked like someone who had shed a weight. Gone was the careful, restrained presence that always stood beside Bill Gates. In its place was a woman speaking in her own voice, on her own terms. She wasn't explaining herself. She wasn't defending the past. She was moving forward. Her book didn't read like a revenge story. It read like closure, a reflection on what happens when trust erodes slowly, quietly, and then all at once. The interviews felt different too, less scripted, more honest. She wasn't just Bill Gates' ex-wife anymore. She was building something separate, an identity not tied to his name, his company, or his legacy. Looking back, the divorce wasn't triggered by one headline or one letter. It was the result of patterns ignored, boundaries crossed, and truths delayed for too long. Walking away cost billions, but staying would have cost her something far more valuable. So the real question isn't whether she made the right choice. It's how long she held on before choosing herself. And once that choice was made, there was never going to be a quiet return to the life she left behind.